Welcome to Get the Facts, the program that provides you with information on government's policies and initiatives. I'm Theodore Henry. On today's program, we will be reviewing aspects of the 2023-2024 budget presentation by Prime Minister Andrew Holness and Minister of Finance Dr. Nigel Clarke. Now, it's a lot to unpack, and sharing in the conversation is financial analyst Dennis Chung. Welcome to the program, Mr. Chung.
Thank you. How are you doing?
All right, good. Great to have you here, and let's just jump right into getting the facts. Let's start with the country's overall performance, growth for all of 2022. What's your view? What's it looking like?
I think that the country has been growing at a rate that was expected to come back to the pre-pandemic levels. So other countries in the world would have gotten back to this point quicker than us. But our economy is somewhat sluggish. But I think that the government did fairly well to manage this situation, because doing all of this recovery within the context of the challenges that we face, the headwinds we face, and then also there was also a global issue with the inflationary environment. I think that they did very well. And coming out at the back of this also, which I think was more telling in terms of how well they did, is that we were still able to get our debt to GDP ratio down. And that, I think, was the most critical thing that came out of this, that even after the ravages that we saw during the pandemic years and the inflationary environment, we still managed to do the fiscal accounts in a responsible way. And that, for me, is the biggest accomplishment.
All right. You mentioned headwinds. You spoke of the COVID-19 pandemic. You spoke of the inflationary environment. And I know we're going to talk about a few more of the headwinds that we're facing. But let's talk about what they did. What is your view on the policies or the decisions that have been taken over the period to improve our economic recovery? And I can mention some standout ones if you'd like.
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone knows from upfront that I wasn't in favor of the lockdowns across the globe, right? But even with that, I think the government still did well to ensure that there was a balance between lockdowns from the medical point of view and keeping the economy open. So it could have been much worse, right? But I think they did well from that standpoint. The fiscal management was for me the standout, because I know that there was a lot of people balling, and
yes,
we had a lot of demands that were on the accounts, but the government took the prudent decision to say, hey, listen, we will have crises from time to time, but we have to ensure that we are responsible with our spending, and it pays off for us, right? The whole matter of the Bank of Jamaica raising interest rates, a lot of people didn't agree with it. I supported the decision, because if they didn't do that, inflation and certainly the exchange rate would have been much higher. And then coming out of it, just managing the whole transition to a more productive economy, which is not difficult, which is difficult. Yes. Sorry. Then those for me were the standouts, in terms of how it was managed, and as a result of that, we're in a very good fiscal position, and we're poised to grow. And we've seen the growth to carry us back to the pandemic levels. And what we need to do now is manage from this point forward to ensure that we continue our growth path, which is going to be a lot more difficult, because we're back at the level we're used to, and normally we're eking out a 1 to 2% growth. The challenge is going to be, how can we get beyond that going forward, and how can we spread it around to everybody?
All right. Now I'm going to put you in a bit of a hot seat position. I want to touch the Prime Minister's presentation, but before that, I want to summarize the Finance Minister's budget presentation. He said a lot, and I'm asking you, can you give us a summary of that?
I think that the Finance Minister's presentation was good, as usual. You're right, he did say a lot, but at the end of the day, what I walked away from it with is that we have been fiscally responsible, right? So a lot of people are talking about no new taxes and, the amount of money that we're going to be putting in certain things. But for me, most importantly, is the fact that we were fiscally responsible and we're seeing the debt to GDP come down. So what that meant, and it came out in the finance minister's presentation, is that because of that fiscally responsible action, we now have more money to put into capital projects. So it emphasizes to me that the emphasis is going to be on developing infrastructure, which is critical for productivity. So you could see that the trend on productivity emphasis was coming from the finance minister and it went into the prime minister's presentation. So that, for me, was the whole end theme of the presentations, that productivity and improving the lives of people is really where the focus is.
Let's go into the Prime Minister's presentation then, because security was the first issue that was addressed by the Prime Minister. Yeah. And coming out of that was the development of a 10-year national action plan, 10 years. Now, how can we ensure that we get this right? And what will the benefits in the 10 years is a long time, but what will the benefits in the near to medium term, going into the long term, look like? How people want to see that something is happening?
Yeah, so the Prime Minister spoke about the long-term plan, long-term vision, right, which I agree with. Investment in the infrastructure of the police force, the investigative capacity of the police force, and we've seen some benefits of that. Look at the trials in terms of the gangs that came out, right? Look at the fact that we're having greater legislation in place now for the Road Traffic Act, for example, which has taken a very long time. We're upgrading the laws in terms of penalties for persons found with guns, and those things are a part of the rollout. And I think that, although we've seen one or two flare up in violence, I think that if we continue on that path and put in place real punitive action, for persons who break the law, then I think that we're going to see an improvement. The challenge that we have is that we've had such a bad culture in terms of law and order. It's going to take some time to change it. But you see the improvement happening in the police force, right? One of the challenges we have, for example, is that irrespective of how good a police force is, the informal settlements is a problem. You can't monitor them properly, and therefore I'm looking at something like NIDS. When NIDS come out, that should help us. But I think we also need to look at how we can develop the infrastructure in these informal settlements, and make them a little more formal. But I think that we're going to start seeing some benefits. I think that to see some benefits. I think as things start roll out more with the Road Traffic Act, and with some of the laws that are in place, and also the capacity of the police. Once we settle the wage negotiations, I think that we're going to start seeing some improvements right away. And it's always darkest before the dawn, and I certainly think that we're heading towards the dawn.
All right. The Prime Minister, he definitely gave the sense of a comprehensive governance plan. And we're going to talk a bit more about that, but we're going to go to our break right now. And I'm inviting everybody to stay with us. We're continuing this discussion. Please, don't go anywhere.